unfolding presidential election. I've sent out a statement on Twitter this morning that I think you've all gotten, and beyond that, I don't have anything to say on that particular subject. What we do want to focus on today, and we picked the Kentucky History Museum because we're talking about the recent history of the Republican Party in this state. It's been a dramatic transformation. Just to give you a sense of what it looked like in 1984, there were 10 Republicans in the state Senate and 28 Democrats. Next year in the state Senate, there will be 30 Republicans and 8 Democrats. In the state House in 1984, there were 23 Republicans and 77 Democrats. Next year, there'll be 75 Republicans and 25 Democrats. I was chairman of something called the Republican County Judges Association. We had 28. They're now 75. So I think it's pretty obvious that this growth has gone on for a fairly lengthy period of time, but it is a dramatically different state than what it was back then. I think we've got on the sheet that we gave you also the registration figures back in 1984 and what they are today. Just a slight difference, and always registration is the last thing to change. People change their voting behavior far before they change their actual registration. And we've tried to pick different intervals here to give you a sense of how the registration has picked up dramatically at various points. I also wanted to comment on a couple of things that were personally pleasing to me. I think you all have heard me say on a number of occasions I've been unhappy with the trend recently across America with regard to college graduates and women. So I was particularly pleased in my race to get 57% of the female vote. Actually, I got a higher percentage of the female vote than of male. And also college-educated people in the suburbs, largely across the country, we've seen a decline in support for Republicans. I was certainly happy to see 58% of college graduates in Kentucky voted for me last Tuesday, and 60% of college graduated women voted for me last Tuesday. So I think that does indicate that the effort to appeal to women voters and to college graduates is a correctable problem that we've had the last few years. I think we can get better at that. And Speaker Osborne will certainly mention that we did better in the suburbs than our two toughest counties, Jefferson and Fayette. Jason Nemeth got reelected. Ken Fleming won his seat back in Jefferson County, and I think we kept the Stan Lee seat, right, in Fayette. So that's an indication that even in the two toughest counties for Republicans these days, it is possible to appeal to suburban voters. One word on the national scene, and that's about all I'm going to have to say about that. I did think the unemployment figure this morning of 6.9% is a stunning indication of a dramatic comeback of the economy. That coupled with the gross domestic product growth in the third quarter indicates that our economy is really moving to get back on its feet. That, I think, clearly ought to affect what size of any rescue package we additionally do. I do think we need another one, but I think it reinforces the argument that I've been making the last few months that something smaller, rather than throwing another $3 trillion at this issue, is more appropriate, with it highly targeted toward things that are directly related to the coronavirus, which we all know is not going away until we get a vaccine. With that, I want to turn to Speaker Osborne because I think the figures from Tuesday night are simply stunning, and I want to congratulate you on an election far beyond anything I ever anticipated observing.
Well, thank you, Leader. It certainly was a stunning night, and it was a historic night, and it started with you years ago. You're the one that had the vision that we could take the majority in the House years ago, and we appreciate all of your efforts on that. It really was an historic night for House Republicans. It appears that we will have 75 members when we come into session in January, which will be certainly the largest number of House Republicans we've ever had, and it'll be the largest majority that any party has had since 1984 when the leader took office. I think that what is particularly gratifying to us, those of us that have invested so much in both policy and politics, is the incredible geographic diversity under which we picked up seats. As the leader alluded to, certainly the enthusiasm and the excitement generated by the top of the ticket was incredibly beneficial in the rural parts of the state. But this was, we got wins in many areas where the headwinds were against us. We retained every single seat and protected every single incumbent. We protected 4 incumbents in Jefferson County, picked up a seat in Jefferson County. We picked up, we held a seat. Probably the number one target that they had was the 45th district in Fayette County. We've held that seat, plus added a seat that does contain a portion of Fayette County, Woodford County, and Franklin County with Dan Pfister. It was great to see that that the people of Kentucky reverse some trends that we've seen over the past couple of cycles, and solidified our majority even in suburban areas. I believe now that House Republicans now have more seats that include portions of Jefferson and Fayette County than the House Democrats have in the entirety of the rest of the state, east of 75 and west of 65. So it was quite an accomplishment, and one that certainly we could have imagined, but did not necessarily anticipate, but are certainly gratified by it. And with that, the guy that even has a little bit bigger margin than we have, President Stivers.
Thank you, David and Senator McConnell. It was a good night and for Republicans, but I want to specifically speak about a couple of things. First of all, I wasn't here in '84. I came in '96, and it was Senator McConnell who was quite the leader for us at the state level. And I don't know if he recalls this, but at one point in time we had a special election that we didn't know if it would be really close or not, because then Governor Steve Beshear was appointing people to benches to try to take us out of the mix. And I actually got Senator McConnell in the bathroom one morning while he was shaving to make sure that we could get some help, and he came to our aid, and really that was one of the big trending races that helped us keep the trajectory we are on now, that finishes, as history will write, today or on Tuesday, where we now have picked up 30 seats in the Senate. For historians, I'm not sure if Al Cross is here, but for historians, we now have more Senate members in the Republican caucus in the Senate than the House has Democrat members in their caucus in the House. Think about that. Senator McConnell also said something that, look at this economy. Well, look at our economy and how it's coming back. And how this all ties in together is when you look at the change in the House a few years ago, the fact that the Senate has been what it has been since 2000, following directions and my agreement with Senator McConnell that we need to be targeted about what we do, our economy is coming back very strong right now in the state of Kentucky. And the reason, in my opinion, that is because what we did in 2016 in changing the economic dynamics and all the things that you saw with the critical investment that took place over the last 3 years prior to this new administration. That's the difference that this change has made over the last 30 years in changing the way the state goes forward to where those demographics, Senator McConnell, you talked about voting for you, are now consistently and regularly voting for Republicans across the board in this state. Last, I cannot, saying that one comment about how it has worked, I cannot say enough for David Osborne and his group of how we've been able to talk, discuss, communicate between ourselves for the last 3 years to effectuate and pass these policies. We truly hope that that type of communication we're having will extend over into the executive branch, and he will come to the table to have further discussions with us, or at least start discussing with us, what we can do to continue to move this state forward. Because it is clear to me, I think it's clear to everybody up here, that you just look at the map, you look at the returns, you look at the numbers, the state wants to go in a direction that we want to move it in. Senator?
Thanks. We're happy to throw it open. Well, I have talked about it. I sent out a tweet this morning that covers my thoughts about the national situation, if that's what you were about to ask. Yeah, I think what I said in the tweet this morning. I'm not going to answer any hypotheticals about where we go from here. I think this is ultimately going to be decided exactly what I said in my tweet. You're going to have contests. You're going to have court decisions. That's how we settle these kinds of disputes in this country. Look, I've already covered the subject. I told you, I sent out a tweet this morning which covers my view of where we are. I told you I have sent out what I want to say today about this situation in the tweet that you all have. I understand that. I've said what I intend to say about it. I've covered the subject already this morning. I don't know how many times you want to keep asking the same question. It would be settled, as I pointed out in the tweet, in exactly the way these matters are always settled. Well, I'm not going to answer a hypothetical about what it might look like. I'm not certain I'm the majority leader yet. As you all may have noticed, that will be determined in Georgia on January the 6th. And so it makes a big difference whether you're the majority leader or the minority leader, even if you end up in a 50-50 situation. We were there at 50-50 in 2000, and it was uncertain because we hadn't been equally divided in the Senate since something in the 1880s. So Senator Lott, who was the majority leader at the time, and Senator Daschle, who were the Democratic leader at the time, got together and decided to set a precedent for what do you do when you end up in a tie. And it made a lot of sense how they settled it. The vice president breaks the tie. At that particular occasion, Dick Cheney was the vice president, so Daschle became Lott became the majority leader and Daschle the minority leader. So it makes a big difference who wins the 2 seats in Georgia. If the Democrats were to win the 2 seats, Chuck Schumer would be the majority leader, and the significance of that job, as we've discussed before, is the majority leader gets to decide what the agenda is, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. So this is not yet decided in this overwhelmingly close national election. We had a very good day. Most pundits thought we were going to lose the Senate, but we have not yet actually secured the majority. That'll be determined in Georgia, where we will have 2 runoffs on January the 6th. I'm sorry?
Do you have faith in the Electoral College?
I do, yeah.
What discussions have you had with the president over the last 100 days?
Oh, I talk to him all the time.
But have you had any specific conversations with him about the election or anything else the last 100
Yeah, I
days?
generally don't report my conversation with the president, but as you know, he's on the phone a lot and we talk frequently.
Senator, it is reasonable to ask the Senate Majority Leader.
I know it's reasonable for you to ask, but I get to decide what I say.
But what concerns do you have about
Uh-huh.
what are your concerns about the president's remarks and the way it might impact the process?
Anybody else got a question related to what we were?
Senator, can you explain why you feel like
I've already explained it. I've already explained it. It won't make any difference how many times you ask. I've already given you my answer.
what do you say to Americans who think that they need more than the Senate Majority Leader during this time?
Yeah, I say to Americans, take a look at what I had to say this morning. Of course, we've had a peaceful transfer of power going back to 1792 every 4 years. Uh, you've moved on to a new administration. In 1792, it was the second Washington administration.
Senator, why did you come to a public press conference?
Anyone else have any questions?
I'm not sure that that I would call it a referendum. I've been asked a couple of times if that was a mandate or a referendum, but I think clearly it is indicative of the way that the people of Kentucky feel. It is obvious that the people of Kentucky spoke loudly that they want Republican control of the legislature, and therefore control of the legislative branch of government. That was, I think, a very loud signal. As I said, I think clearly the enthusiasm at the top of the ticket with the leader and the president in rural Kentucky generated great benefit for us. But when you look in places where the headwinds were against us, suburban Jefferson County, I think that speaks loudly of the failure of leadership in Louisville and Jefferson County. Areas, the city of Ashland, the city of Owensboro, the seats in Lexington and in suburban areas surrounding Lexington. I believe that you have to conclude, given the fact that the governor was highly involved in those races, that at the very least they didn't want to reward him for anything that he had done. We have, and I hope that he will take that as an opportunity to engage the legislature. We've been asking for months for that to happen, and every time we've tried to force the issue, he's accused us of playing politics. Clearly, he decided to play politics in this. He recruited candidates, he raised enormous amounts of money, he endorsed candidates, he campaigned for candidates, and every single one of them lost. So I believe that is some statement. I'll let you conclude whether it's a referendum or not.
I don't think it is a referendum, but I definitely think it's a reflection, Lawrence, because, the governor wants to sit there and say, don't question me, and if you question me, you're trying to play gotcha politics. Now, we have legitimate questions, and I think people want those questions answered. He wants to take credit for the mass initiative. Senator McConnell has worked with him quite well, made a lot of announcements, has worn his mask. We all know that we need to wear masks, stay socially distanced as we are here, do all the appropriate things. But he went out and campaigned on, send people to come up here and support me, put it in flyers, and then wants to say he's not playing politics with this issue. We talked about the economy, and people are worried about the economy. We've written letters, joint letters, saying we've got to worry about the economy. And finally, I think he listened to us with one of his very brief statements yesterday. But is it exclusive in a referendum? No, because this man had part of the impact. The presidential race had a part of the impact. But the numbers in and of themselves tell you what the public thinks when the governor sits there and disparages the legislature in front of you, saying, you think I want to work with them? Well, the public spoke pretty loudly. 75% of the House is Republican 80% of the Senate is Republican. I want to say this. We're going to refine. There's no doubt that chief executives of any state or at the federal level need types of powers in emergency. We all agree with that. What's the extent and duration? How do you apply them? Think about this. In one of the lawsuits that was filed, you had an ag tourism group in Scott County that was only allowed to have 10 people per acre. That was the governor's guidance, and went out there and shut them down. So they filed a lawsuit knowing that Kentucky Kingdom on 14 acres is allowed 16,000 people. Equal application. Senator McConnell, again, I'm referencing him, had a great speech talking about this is a time when you really need to follow the Constitution. There has not been even application of anything he's done. You can have a protest. We agree with protest. But then he sends state troopers out to churches to cite people, threatens them with fines, has his chief person, Dr. Stack, who releases a piece of information calling pastors ignorant. Is this really the tone that he should be setting?
Let me just make one observation. I'm not, don't serve in Frankfort, but given the fact that the coronavirus is still here, very much here, and the question people often ask of governors, not just ours, but all across the country, what is the best place to be from a public health point of view? Well, I think it's noteworthy that one thing that Donald Trump and Anthony Fauci agree on is that we can't shut the economy down again. So the message to us is, how do we work safely through this period until we get a vaccine? And Robert has touched on it. We have to act responsibly. And in the Senate, we've been doing that since the 1st of May by wearing a mask and practice social distancing and trying to prevent the spread. That's all we can do until we get a vaccine, because the economic calamity was dramatic, absolutely dramatic. It also had public health implications. Suicides up, overdoses up, spouse abuse up, child abuse up, lots of bad problems as a result of being cooped up. So I do hope all the governors will think twice before they move in the direction of doing what we did back in the spring, which everybody thought was a responsible thing to do at the time, but we now understand that that was not risk-free either. And we need to work our way through this until we get one or more vaccines, hopefully in the very near future. I'd rather let these guys comment on the Kentucky situation. I was making a broad comment about going back to anything close to what we did in the spring. Seems to me to have, in retrospect, been counterproductive, and I think that's what Dr. Fauci now thinks too, because, as I said, he and the president actually agree we shouldn't shut the economy down again. I don't know if you guys want to.
My question was about the general election, the way the process took place because of the pandemic, having early voting, more absentee.
It seems to me the election turned out just fine. I mean, I don't have any complaint about how it was set up. These guys will have to decide whether that was a one-time way to do an election or just an aberration. I'll leave that up to them.
I think certainly under the circumstances, the system worked very well. I know that in conversations with a number of the clerks, a number of other officials, they have some concerns about some things going forward. I think that you will see some of these changes made permanent, but I also think in consultation with the Clerks Association, we certainly want to consider their input as well, because they're the ones that are actually fulfilling these orders, and we need to make sure that their voice is heard as well. It's premature to get into that. We're going to put together a working group to get together with the Secretary of State, the executive branch, with the Clerks Association to look at what actually did work, what will work going forward, what was unnecessary, and what additional things may be done going forward. So it'd be premature to speculate at this point. I think some degree of early voting is certainly something that we will consider, yes.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Senator, could I ask you one last question?
We have our retreat scheduled for December.